Namaste and welcome.
Namaste, Revlo.
Gotti Lisa, we are here again for part 2 of Miracles with a Twist conversations. And I just want to welcome everyone and thank you for being here. I'm Reverend Lori Cardona. I'm here with Gotti Lisa. We are here to present to you our desire to truly dig deep and unpack issues related to A Course in Miracles from an interfaith perspective and from a mystic's perspective, from an everyday spirituality perspective, ways to look at what was presented during our live stream, which is Miracles with a Twist, a live stream that is posted every Thursday on our Facebook page called Miracles with a Twist. Now, as an adjunct to that, we've added this program, Miracles with a Twist Conversations. And I wanted to give the folks who listen and participate an opportunity to get to know us a little bit more. In our first conversation, we talked about why we think this is important to us and why we think it's important to those of you who are interested in doing the unpacking and the digging deep with us. But really, who are we and what qualifies us? And whether or not we're truly qualified is really up to Spirit to determine, but Spirit has moved us. So I'd like to begin by inviting Gotti Lisa to give us a little bit of background on your spiritual journey and what brings you together to this point in time to the creation of Miracles with a Twist conversations.
Wow. That's a lot of years and a lot of stuff. And thank you very much, Revlo, for allowing me the opportunity. I was raised Roman Catholic in a Roman Catholic home where, at the time it was considered a mixed marriage because my mother was Episcopalian, my father was Roman Catholic. In order to marry a Roman Catholic, one had to agree to raise the children Roman Catholic. My mother agreed to send us to the Roman Catholic Church, to catechism and so forth. She did not agree to go. My father drove, my mother didn't. He drove us and he took us. So I was raised in a Roman Catholic church and it had its ups and downs. When I first started going, it was actually in Latin and it was very dark and kind of scary and I didn't know what we were saying anyway. And then after Vatican II, it flopped over to English, which ticked my father off because he said it was the only time he got any rest was when he went to church and didn't have to listen because he didn't know what they were saying. But to me, I started listening and it was still very frightening. But my mother, my grandmother, was a very devout Episcopalian. So I was just enamored with my grandparents and my auntie. And so I would go to church with them. I would spend the weekends with them. And it was very interesting to see this Jesus person who I had been terrified of hurting because it was my fault that Jesus had died on the cross with this bloody heart hanging out. Yeah. And in the Episcopal Church, they usually have the resurrected Christ at the front of the altar. So that was a big difference because there was no bloody heart. But I went to Sunday school too, as opposed to catechism. And there was a difference. In catechism, you learned the catechism. In Sunday school, we painted and we colored and we learned stories from the Bible and that. And I learned about this loving Jesus. Now, I had never been told in the Catholic Church that he wasn't loving. I was just scared. I had done terrible things. So anyway, fast forward, loved being with my auntie and my granny. I think that was part of the reason that I loved the church so much. Everybody loved me. It was small. And the rule was in our home that once you made your confirmation, which is at about the age of 12 or 13, you confirm your Roman Catholicism and your commitment to God. It's kind of like a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah in the Jewish faith. But once you made your confirmation, you didn't have to go to church unless you wanted to. And I didn't. I did go with Granny and Auntie, but I didn't go to the Roman church. There was just things frightening about it. I love the other one. And I didn't go to church in between Granny and home. If I wasn't going with Granny, I wasn't going anywhere. And then through my teen years, I got involved with all kinds of things like Baha'i, which is an interesting little, not so little, but an interesting spirituality. It was all young people, all jumping around and singing, but that kind of went by the wayside too, because I was used to Jesus and all that. And then I guess the biggest thing that came after that was I was attending an Episcopal church, my husband and I both, in the Florida Keys. We moved to the Florida Keys, and it was just a little teeny church with 40 people. And there was the Episcopal Diocese of Southeast Florida or something had this course, or it was the National Episcopal Church, I guess, through the University of the South in Sewanee, this 4-year course in Judeo-Christianity. And so I did that. The only thing is that after my 3rd year, there was no teacher in the Keys. And so it was like 10 years later, I'm back in Broward County, Florida, and I found a place where they did this, it was called Education for Ministry, and I was able to do my 4th year. So it took me about 15 years to do a 4-year course. And it was really a neat thing. It was from an Episcopal perspective, but each year was really interesting. And I got to start thinking outside of the box more. If those listening are familiar with the Roman Church or the Episcopal Church, it's very liturgical. It's very, you stand up, you sit down, you say certain prayers and so forth, and you have communion, the body and blood of Jesus Christ, every Sunday, every holiday. It's essential. So I started wondering about different things, and then about what I was saying and what I meant. And I just realized that things just weren't making much sense to me. And again, fast forward, I attended a lot of conferences. I read a lot, different spiritualities and so forth. And I ultimately had a really neat, painful experience of extracting myself from organized religion completely.
Yeah.
And that was very difficult for me, very difficult, because where do you go when you don't have your spiritual family? Whether it's scaring the daylights out of you or it's nurturing you, it was terrifying to me. And I tried with my husband and a couple of friends and to put together our own stuff that we could do so we could just talk. We did different studies and so forth, and I loved it. But it just wasn't enough. It wasn't about Jesus. There was no standing up, there was no sitting down. There was no, we would do communion, but we had been told that communion, unless it was done by an ordained Roman Catholic or Episcopal priest, wasn't really communion. And it was very difficult, but something just kept stirring. Ultimately, I found the Unity Church, which was a magnificent catalyst from the structured, organized religion that I came from into the metaphysical. And I was there for about 4 years, and then I was ready to fly. And it was in the Unity Church that I met a friend, and she worked a bunch of jobs, never had any money, and was struggling with addiction recovery and all that, and just working so hard. And she came up to me one day and said, "I'm going to seminary." And I was like, "Well, that's wonderful. Seminary, I mean, that's just amazing." And I, at the time, was about 60. And so I had to say to her, "How are you going to seminary when you work umpteen jobs, your car falls apart on you all the time, and you struggle so hard, and you're doing amazingly well with recovery? How are you doing this?" And she said, "Well, it's a really neat seminary. You only have to be there once a month." So she said, "I can, get that day." She said, "It's all day." And she said, "And the work is done online." And she said, "You really need to check it out." So I said, "Give me the name." So she gave me the name, which happened to turn out to be Sacred Journey Interfaith Seminary. And for those who do not know, our own Rev Lowe is co-founder, along with Rev G, of Sacred Journey Interfaith Seminary.
Yes.
I was living in the Bahamas. It was absolutely the perfect time for me to go, because in the Bahamas, where my husband was working, the spouses couldn't work. So it was just the perfect time to allow me the time to do research and all that. But also we were on a little teeny island with little private things and no libraries, no churches or whatever per se. And so I thought, I don't know if I can do this. So I spoke to Rev Lowe and I spoke to Rev G, and I'm like, I'm going to do this. Spoke to my husband, we're ready to go. And then the next thing you know, for some reason, I just start thinking, and please, everybody listening, don't let this happen. It will happen to you when you get this wonderful feeling to go ahead with it. Often can come your ego that goes, this is why you can't do it. This is why you can't do it. I listened to ego. And so I kind of fell off the grid of starting seminary. Told my husband when he came home from work what the story was. And I said, baby, I don't think I can do this. And he said, why would you not? Just tell me why you would not. And I gave him a list of ridiculous things. And he said, well, I think that you should do it, but it's up to you. You need to do what you need to do. So in the meantime, I don't know whether I contacted you guys or you guys both, because I spoke with both of you after the crazy. I went to seminary. It was 2016, September 24th, my brother's birthday. And I remember coming back to the island after each class and checking off from the syllabus, I made it. I made it through that class. Then I went through the work. And every time I sent you guys an email with my assignment, I would get a stomach ache over. And this is, something instilled in me. It had nothing to do with school. It's instilled in me from childhood. But I would wait. And as soon as I saw an email from you or Rev G, I would be like, because I was so afraid you were telling me everything I did wrong. And I just got wonderful support and input. And I will never forget when we had to turn in our thesis or whatever you wanted to call it, that we had worked on all year, and we had to do it in a specific form, for like you're going for your PhD kind of form. And Rev G, I sent it to Rev G, and within like 20 minutes of when I sent it to her, I got a phone call from her on the island. I never got a phone call on my stuff. And I said to Paul, Rev G called me and she wants me to call her back. It's the project, babe. I ruined it. So I went on because it's my nature to be a goofball. So anyway, he goes, I think she's calling you to tell you that it's the best thing she's ever read. And I'm like, I don't think so, but I have to call her. So I called her, and she said, because I had said, here it is, help me to make it presentable. Because she had said, any help you need. So I called her. She didn't even say hello. She said, do not change a thing. And it was like, such a relief and a release. And that was the first year that I actually was able, first time in my life actually, but it was the first year of seminary. And I was actually able to release all this stuff that I had put on myself, because I thought, I've worked so hard. I've done very well, gotten very good comments, loved going to class once a month. The word intensive that we had at the end of the first year scared the pants off of me, and I was terrified about that, but that turned out to be an absolute amazing experience. And so I couldn't wait to get into the second year, where we put into practice different rituals and ceremonies and all that kind of stuff. I absolutely loved it. And I absolutely fell in love with Rev Lowe and Rev G. And in particular, Rev Lowe and I have become friends through Course in Miracles and just hearts. And it was through our spiritual direction, actually, that this idea came to me about, talking about A Course in Miracles, or Miracles with a Twist, rather, because there was just so much that always went on in my mind. And so I wanted to talk more about it. And that's why I wanted to have spiritual direction with Rev Lowe. And so it was just, it just came about, and here we are. And I hope I haven't bored everybody stiff, but here I am. So thank you. And now maybe hear from the Reverend Dr. Lori Cardona, AKA Rev Lowe.
Thank you. It's great to be reminded of our spiritual journeys and what brings us to where we are and where we started and where we were, where we want to be, and where we're going. All of that. I too started out in Catholic church, Catholic school. I used to say for 8 years, the only thing that changed was the size of my little green forest knee sock, my forest green knee socks, just kept growing, but I didn't feel as though I was really getting a spiritual experience. I was getting an academic experience. So after 8th grade, I went to public school. And that was just a wild awakening that there was this other world beyond the fear-based approach that I experienced, the fear-based teaching approach that I experienced as a Catholic schoolgirl. And I just went through a little bit of a wild phase that did not include spirituality, did not include going to church. And it wasn't until my early 20s, I got very sick. And I was sick for about 1.5 years. And during that 1.5 years, I did a lot of contemplation about my life, how I was living my life, the things I did, the things I thought, my diet, everything that I wanted to reevaluate. And I went on what I call my search for truth beyond Catholicism. And that took me in many different directions. And for the next maybe 10, 15 years, I was really digging deep into other things other than Catholicism. East, West, I would travel, I'd go on retreats. I tried so many different avenues. I took so many different classes, and there came, and A Course in Miracles came along as a part of that at some point, but I didn't give it a lot of thought. I was also doing a lot of New Age things, healing modalities and crystals, and then at the same time, looking at things like self-realization fellowships, which was more a combination of East and West, and just really wanting to get a sense of what was right. And what I came to realize at some point was that everybody was a little bit right, but nobody was 100% right. And I wondered, well, what do you do with that? What do you do with believing in some things? And I would be so impressed with people who could totally immerse themselves in a religion, whether it was Christianity or Buddhism or Islam or Baha'i, as you mentioned earlier, whatever it was, Wiccan even, I traveled the Wiccan way, the Native American way, African spiritual. I mean, I traveled in so many of those different directions, and I was always impressed with people who could do a total immersion into those religions. And I would think, wow, you did that pilgrimage, you did this, you did that, but it never felt as though it was completely right for me in terms of a total immersion. But anyone who went sort of independently into a search for God seemed to speak a language that I could understand more so. With it's almost like being at a buffet, and you just get to taste so many wonderful deliciousness, And fast forward to my mid-40s, because I spent most of my career, my professional career, in the helping professions as a professional. I was very young when I was given lots of responsibilities in running human service organizations. So one day I was speaking with a friend of mine whose aunt was a graduate of the new seminary, and she was telling me about the new seminary, which was the first interfaith seminary in the world, the first one created. It's been through a lot of changes now. It doesn't exist as just that seminary anymore. But at the time, this was back in 1998. And I like to say, and still say, that my calling came in a phone call, because after that phone call, I hung up. This is back in the days of landlines and dial tones. I picked the phone back up and I called the registrar at the seminary. I mean, there was no hesitation. It was maybe like a 10-second delay, you know. And I called and I asked to be considered as a candidate for the seminary. I jumped through whatever hoops had to be jumped through, and I started seminary in I believe it was June of 1998. I was ordained in June of 2000. June 25th will be my 22nd year anniversary. This June 25th. And as a graduate of the seminary, I started moving away from doing just the private practice and the consultation work that I was doing, and starting to integrate spiritual direction and ministry. I was doing guest ministry in different churches, mostly Unity churches, around Broward County, Dade County, and also out of the state. My brother was living in Puerto Rico. He flew me in. He moved to Vermont. He flew me up there. And, you know, I spent like my first year pretty much doing guest ministry and a lot of funerals, because I was working as a consultant to hospice at the time. So I was doing funerals and some weddings. Fast forward to 2013. And I was sitting with my very good friend, Reverend Grace Telesco, who I had known for many years, but at some point in her career as a police officer, she went to the exact same seminary I did. And when I found out that she was a graduate of the seminary, we got together and we said, what can we do as a partnership to create something that inspires and motivates both of us as ministers? And the thing that we came up with was combining our great loves, ministry and education. And we would sit in what we called our office, which was a coffee shop in Fort Lauderdale, and we would think and we would pray. We had this little rock that we considered our rock, and we would put our fingers on that rock and we would pray, and we'd say, on this rock we are developing our dream of having a seminary. And we called our ordaining deans about creating an adjunct to the seminary we graduated from, but there had been so much changes that it wasn't the right fit. And at one point we said, what if we just do it on our own? And we both thought that was like, wow, what a tall order. You know, like, are we, you know, is that even arrogant of us to think so? And we prayed on our little rock, and we came together time and time again. We threw out names. We even called attorneys. We did all kinds of, you know, like professional life investigations and spiritual life investigations. And at some point, we came up with the name Sacred Journey Interfaith Seminary. We came up with the 4 prongs of the seminary, and we created the labyrinth, the 4-pronged labyrinth, which is our logo that represents the seminary's 4 prongs. Which, for anyone who's interested, is that we created a seminary that is based on wisdom, ritual, reflection, and prayer. Wisdom, ritual, reflection, and oh my God, the other one just escaped me.
I always memorized ritual.
Well, the idea was
reflection.
Yeah, what we do is we do wisdom studies, and we teach all the prayers and the rituals and things. And we decided that we would do these 4 prongs and have people focus on those 4 prongs for the 2 years of their studies. And during that time, we started letting people know that we were available, and the seminary was going to launch. And here it is now, 2022, and we're still in existence. But back to 2016, we had your name as an interested party. And we were having one of our meetings, and we were looking through, like, who are the people who had contacted us? And your name doesn't come up as Lisa. It comes up as your email, which is not Lisa or Paul. And we came up with it. We found your number. We found your friend who was referring you to us, and we loved and was one of your classmates. And we gave you a call. We called you, at a 305 number, but you said I'm actually in the Bahamas, and we're like, oh wow, what are the chances that she's going to fly in? But you flew in.
Yes, I did.
For an entire year, and it was just amazing. Um, and so from student status, you became a regular participant in the Miracles with a Twist presentations that I do once a week on Thursday evenings.
Yep.
When COVID hit, we went from having a location out in the world to a location here in my home, which I call the Tamrak Ashram, because we created a sacred space here in my home where we meet every Thursday and we do the live stream. Now, A Course in Miracles came to me, as I said, as part of my quest for truth beyond Catholicism. But one of the things that happened during seminary, and I hope we impress this upon you too, is that they said, don't graduate, don't get ordained until you make peace with the church of your upbringing. And so I made peace with Catholicism, and not just peace, but like a deep love. Like I was able to really love my foundation, my very foundation. And I to this day, I love going to old churches. I love going to empty churches, not necessarily during the services, but during that alone time when I can feel the love, the foundation, the rituals, the prayers that linger there, And so I made peace with Catholicism, and I made peace with the part of me that does not and has not adhered to one particular doctrine, but to the idea that through contemplative connection, we can have our divine spiritual guidance and direction without calling it a particular name. In seminary, we call it sacred service. We say that we ordain you to sacred service. And as part of finding a lean towards something that stays with me, that lean towards something ended up being A Course in Miracles. John Mundy, one of my ordaining deans, says that A Course in Miracles is the Christian Vedanta. But I don't really think it's the Christian anything. I think it stands alone. I think it is just a Christ consciousness doctrine that leads us toward a path of connection. Not dogma, doctrine. It's a theology in and of its own. It specifically says a universal theology is impossible, but a universal experience is possible and necessary. And it tells us that nothing unreal exists, and that we are here to connect with what is real. And what is real is beyond the physical. It is what we can connect to on a super conscious level, the part of our consciousness that connects with every other person who has been in this world in their physical body, who has left their physical body, and who is yet to come. Because it's about being connected to our brothers and our sisters and seeing everyone as a brother and a sister, to have eyes that are blessed, to have hearts that are blessed and expanded, to have an expanded consciousness. And that's why these conversations will become so important, because there are times when it is so difficult to see another as a innocent brother or sister. And whether that's somebody that we are engaged in on a personal battle, or someone that we see out in the world that has created battle. And we live at a time where we have a lot of exposure to the news, to the internet, and that tells us what's going on out in the world, and we become affected by it. And that's why these conversations, I believe, will be essential, because as essential workers, remember that name came up to all of us during COVID. We started saying, oh, those people are essential workers. But what the Course in Miracles says is that we are all essential workers. There's a lesson that specifically says, I am essential to the plan of God. And it is a reminder, I think it's lesson 100. It is a reminder that we are all essential to the unfolding plan that brings us in a place of consciousness, to be aware of how we're interacting with each other, how we're even thinking of each other, and allowing ourselves to make the corrections of the mistakes that we make, because we make them every day. Not sins, because the Course doesn't even acknowledge sins. Yep. It says what we call sins are mistakes in need of correction. So at the end of the day, if we can look at ourselves and say, you know what, there are some things that I need to correct, There's some ways in which I can do better. There's some ways I can rise higher, pray harder, forgive and love.
I can see this differently.
I can see this differently. Yes, yes. And so that's what we're here to do. That's what we're here to do on our individual path, on our joint path, and specifically as co-facilitators of this program, Miracles with a Twist Conversations. So just to remind everybody, we are here to dig deep and unpack on issues that are related to A Course in Miracles. I'm Rev Lori Cardona. You hear Reverend Lisa refer to me as Rev Lo. I refer to her as Gotti Lisa. They're both terms of affection because we want this to be a casual opportunity for everyone to join in on the conversation. Would you like to speak more as to how others can, how our friends and mighty companions and kindred spirits can communicate with us?
Yes, I would. But one thing I would like to thank you for in what you said, the whole thing I thank you for, but that reconciliation was with our own religion. If we had issues with our own religion, if we had one, it's not necessary to be, to go to the seminary that you have an old religion or a new one or whatever. That was so wonderful for me. I was on that journey when I entered the seminary, and I learned various ways to love Jesus, who I had left behind. Love what, like you were talking about, the beauty, the history, the liturgy, all of that, of these cathedrals and churches and all that stuff, the stuff that used to creep me out. I was able to find just what it really was, what I was being taught by God that took me all this time to hear. And I couldn't have done it without the Catholic Church. I just couldn't have. So I just had to say that. Thank you very much for talking about that. And I hope that everybody realizes that. Bring it with you. If you have an issue, then we'll help you work it out. But bring it with you. You don't want to give up the religion you have, you shouldn't. We go very deep to just being unified and loving and forgiving. And it's just an amazing thing. And to that end, I think it's important to point out that we will be providing, or we are providing, an opportunity for you to comment or email us with your questions and your thoughts, so that we can keep this interactive. Rev Lo and I really want to bring to you what we've learned and what we think and all that kind of stuff. But the only way we can really dig deep and unpack all of this stuff is to hear from you. And we are providing the comment section, we are providing an email, and we will be looking at it, and we will be putting out our videos each week on Monday. But we will not hesitate should something arise and it looks like it's necessary. Hey, you subscribe, you'll get a little bell or whatever, who knows, whatever you set up, and it'll be something that we feel is very important because of what you've told us, maybe what's been on the news or just something you've experienced in your life. And we're seeing a lot of the chatter like that. We're not just going to leave it on Monday at 1 o'clock and just say, okay, well, next week we'll talk about that. So
yeah, nobody's going to get left hanging. Nobody will get left hanging. So we will leave links in the commentary section on how you can contact us, as well as how you can find us on Facebook, on Instagram. We're just going to be anywhere that you like to be as far as social media. Miracles with a Twist is on Thursday nights. Miracles with a Twist Conversations will be launched every Monday. So you've got two opportunities to listen, feel, respond to whatever it is that comes up from A Course in Miracles perspective. A couple of taglines. In case I didn't go back and say the whole thing, because I was like in flow, the seminary's 4 prongs, did I say them as energy, reflection, wisdom, and ritual. And for a course in miracles, specifically Miracles with a Twist, we say we take the material from Hetty to Hardy, and Miracles with a Twist conversations is we bring you into the conversation and we respond to you. So we really look forward to taking it further. We want to unpack and dig deep with you. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Gadi Lisa. I love you.
Thank you. Love you too. Namaste.
Namaste.